Okay, welcome back. This is just a special section that's not really in the book. It's on hardening your machine, or what you might call practical security. So we're going to go through this thing. So here, if you have a Windows-based, machine, here's some things you ought to consider. Disabling the automatic login. Now, I'll confess that my mother, I set up her machine so when she turns it on, it automatically goes directly to her desktop and doesn't prompt her for anything at all. Now, how practical is that? Now, just to give you the context, my mom lives in like an assisted living kind of facility, and just to talk about security, not only do they not lock their doors at the facility, they don't even close the doors. You're walking down the halls, everyone's door is open. You could see them in there watching TV. I mean, right? So having a machine that just happens to have it logged in, that's okay. Use a password with a screensaver. Now, you might think, if I leave my machine on and the screensaver pops up, why on earth would I want to, put a password on there? Well, you're hosting a party for the neighbors. Get to know the new neighbors, and everyone, at your house, somebody says, hey, where's the bathroom? You go, down the hall to the left. They walk right past your study, right? I mean, you really, even if you're at home, you kind of sort of do need a screensaver on the password. I'm sorry. Is it annoying? Yeah. Maybe to reduce the annoyance, maybe make it like 15 minutes or something before it kicks in. Something. Most all software now, operating systems, have a built-in firewall, and obviously you should probably turn that on. And then if you have remote access, now this is like, for example, I've seen people who had like a main machine and had the kids' machine, and they allowed what's called a network share across the network, so that the kids are sitting in their room, they can bring up the family photos that are on your PC. Okay, that's okay. It's okay, but maybe if from a secure environment, you ought not have any of those remote access features turned on. And then, of course, the built-in antivirus. If you are a very, very diligent person and, cognizant of what you're doing, then maybe just using the built-in Defender from Microsoft is sufficient. You probably don't need anything else. On the other hand, if you got some reckless people or some kids, maybe you need to go ahead and get a third-party project. Now, let me ask you, when you install a third-party software, does it completely wipe out the existing one? No, they're not exactly layered, but they cooperate with each other. Basically, the real-time scanning gets put away on Defender, and they use a third party for real-time. But you can still go to Defender and say, scan my machine, and it'll say, sure, boss. In other words, it hasn't uninstalled the old one. It just put layers on top of it. And no, it's configured so that it won't be scanning at the same time, right? Any of that stuff. There's no real performance penalty of having two antiviruses on the same machine. I saw a video where somebody installed, I don't know, like a dozen different antiviruses on top of each other. And now, I'm talking about Defender and a third party, not two or three third parties, okay? Because they don't know how to cooperate with each other, right? But they do know how to cooperate with Windows Defender. Okay, so obviously keep your machine up to snuff. The auto update feature. There was a hue and cry way back when, in the middle of Windows 10 deployment, where they said, we're going to make security updates mandatory. And everybody went, all right. But it was the right call. And here's one of the things that people talk about. They'll say, well, I don't have anything on my machine worth taking, so I don't care. They can give me viruses all day long. I don't care. The problem is, they'll put a virus on that person's machine and turn it into a bot, and it will attack other people's machine who do care about what's on their machine. So no, it's sort of like going down the road, and what you're supposed to be doing in the left-hand lane. Everyone has to play by the same rules, and do periodic backups. A lot of people do not have any type of backups. I prefer honest to God real backup software. And then I even kind of sort of do off-site, not every time, but I do backups like on a weekly basis. And once a quarter, I take backups to the office, which is 20 miles away. So yeah, that's the way you really should do it. So if your house burnt down, you at least be able to get all your accounting information and all the stuff, all the auto pay in the bank and everything all comes along with it. So we'll talk about backups. We talked about backups in Chapter 5, about how it's never a good idea to have just a continuous online thing, because that's not really a backup. It's convenient, but it's not a backup. Use built-in encryption. So, for personally identifiable information, I have a couple of folders which have what's just called sensitive. Okay. And it's got, my password list, and, it's got a bunch of other stuff. My social security number, copy of my driver's license, and a scan of my credit cards, all those kinds of things. Now, if you have a laptop and you want to protect it, turn on the BitLocker feature. And most, well, I don't know about most, but I think if you buy a business line of laptop, it's probably already turned on. You have to go turn it off. But just an average machine you buy at Best Buy, I don't know. You'd have to manually turn it on. Okay, not everybody needs to have admin rights. So my wife, and including my mother, do not have admin rights on their own machine. They own these machines. They're theirs, but they don't have access to it. So I have to go in and give them my password to be able to install software or something. And then use a password manager. Password manager has been out there for quite some time. So I'm going to click on this little guy. And so here's the best password managers, NordPass and RoboForm, Dashline, LightPass. LightPass has been out there a while, and a lot of people like it. However, they had a relatively rough break-in not too long ago, and they stole customer data, but it wasn't like the passwords they stole. They stole like the metadata. But I don't even want people to know what bank I go with or what websites I go to, right? I mean, he's got an account on Wells Fargo. I don't want to even know that. So I said, okay. So I'll tell you what, there's 1Pass. I've heard of those guys. Bitwarden. Okay. I actually recommend Bitwarden, and there's two reasons. One is it's the only one that's free. Okay. Does a dang good job. Now, all these have a browser plugin, right? Extension. So you go to your browser, you install this thing, and it'll start remembering all your passwords. It's like, well, how's that any different than the one that's built into the Edge browser now? Well, kind of, but I can also go to a little icon and bring up all my passwords and look at them. Or if I'm remote and I don't have that application, I'm visiting someplace, I can go to the Bitwarden website and see them all. Maybe I don't need all the fancy completion. I just want to bring it up. Oh, that's the password. Copy. And then go back to the page I'm out and hit paste, right? Manually do it. I don't necessarily need a browser extension. You can do it without a browser extension. And also, Bitwarden has another crazy feature. And that is you could host it local. You don't necessarily have to use their website. Now, I'll confess, that's not really for home use. I mean, you could, but that's not the intended. They intended it for like big corporations, that have a lot of stuff. And so they don't want you going across the network to be able to get to your vault. They want you to go stay local, so to speak. So it's a pretty good, and the fact that it's the only free one, that's the reason why I recommend it. Okay, so a user checklist. Obviously, create strong passwords. Help your family members come up with passwords, okay? And don't reuse the same name and password everywhere. Now, I'll confess, if you have, I probably have, 100, I'm making that number up, 100 different locations where I have names and passwords. So I'm not going to remember 100 passwords if they're all different. That's why I use a password manager, because I can't keep up with all that stuff. What about saving them in the browser? A lot of people do. Instead of using a third-party password manager, they just use the password manager feature in Windows. So like if you're using, it doesn't matter if you're using Edge, they have their own. Chrome has its own. All those people that just built in. You don't need a third party, but you're kind of stuck with, only works on those machines that have the browser extension. If you're visiting somebody else's house. Well, no, they don't have the extension. So is that good? It's good. Is it good as a third party? Well, depends on your use case, but probably not. Okay, this is just common sense stuff. Don't download software from untrusted sites. Yeah. I should say don't shop at untrusted sites. Okay, man, I've seen some god-awful, Chinese knockoff websites that like, geez. Okay. Don't click on email attachments. Yeah. This should say don't click on email attachments that you're not sure of. But, judgment calls for a 10-year-old, just tell them don't click on email attachments at all, right? Don't expect them to be smart enough to go, oh, this is a good one, that's a bad one. Just saying. And then more from a corporate point of view, don't store sensitive data on a USB drive because you might lose it. Okay, don't have your customer list or anything with social security numbers or student data or anything like that on a USB drive. Makes sense. And then again, if you have a laptop or a tablet, for God's sakes, don't leave it out. Oh, I'm going to go to the bathroom at the coffee shop. I'll just leave my laptop here and I'll be right back. Well, somebody might just pick it up and run off with it. So again, that's more like corporate espionage kind of thing, where somebody steals your tablet or your laptop or your USB drive. Okay, so other things. This is just common sense. Do you have an alarm system for your house? Or whatever apartment that you're in? Do you have good locks? Do you have deadbolt? That kind of stuff. Do you close the windows? Do you lock them? Do you lock your car? Now, for some reason, my wife doesn't lock her car. She goes grocery shopping. She just gets out and goes on about her business. I'm thinking, man, I lock it every single time. My car has a feature when you automatically step away. You get about 10 feet away, you can hear it go, chirp. It locks the car automatically, so I don't even have to think about it. Invest in a simple shredder. It doesn't have to be a very expensive one. You can just go to, Walmart or some office supply place and get just a very simple shredder. So, any bank statement or anything or any bill you get, just run it through the shredder so that anyone digging through your trash won't know that you have an account at Wells Fargo. Okay. And here's one that's crazy. I've been in a line at the grocery store and hear somebody talking, maybe even to the clerk or on the phone. Hey, we're going to be gone next week. We're going to Cancun. There won't be anyone at the house. Well, thank you. And now I know when you're not going to be there. So I'm going to go burgle you. Okay? So yeah, just situational awareness. Don't go around telling people. And this is tough because everyone wants to post their Instagram, or update their Facebook with, the shots on the beach. Well, I now know you're not at home. Okay? It would make sense if you could wait until you get home to post those. I know people don't do that ever, but that would probably make a little bit more sense. Okay, so let's talk about Wi-Fi generations, and this is a complicated topic, and I'm going to go in a little bit of detail, but not much. So the newer generations are obviously faster, right? But what about security? Well, each iteration, they're getting a little bit better. So right now, the current ones are the 6E, and it's pretty good. It's about 6.5 megabit per second. Gigabit per second. Wi-Fi 7, which is not just now came out, and I don't have any devices on that. It'll go up to 54 megabit per second. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. Gigabit per second. Now hang on. Let's say that I have my ISP is coming in at 1 gig, and my wireless can do 40 gig. Well, what's the speed going to be on my wireless device to hit the internet? It ain't going to be 40. So do you need 6E at home? Do you need 7 at home? No, not for speed. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark.